Welcome to Gelvin Valley for Farming Simulator 15. Wonderful map created by Wild Wes. We are still cutting timber here with the goal to finish knocking down this plot of trees here. And then we're going to have another one just down the valley a ways, where hopefully we can cut all the trees, accumulate them all together, and get them sold. No muss, no fuss. I'm actually doing a voiceover for this particular video. I wanted to share a little bit more on the threshing bee or the steam up Antique Powerland. I've mentioned it in a couple videos, and it was going to be a little cumbersome to try to do that while farming at the same time, because part of what I need to refer to here is reading material. And it's always difficult to read and drive, not to mention dangerous. So, wanted to share a little bit more. And again, this was something I did this past summer. They have it every summer here in the mid-Willamette Valley of Oregon near Brooks, little town of Brooks, where they have a plot of land where this all takes place. And maybe what I would start off with here, I'm looking at their website that they have. I'll try to remember to leave a link in the description down there so you all can go check it out if you're interested. And you know, this isn't the only place on the planet where they have things like this. It's not even the only one in our particular state. All around the world, there are people interested in old stuff. So I know I'm not the only nut interested in such a thing. But this here has some fairly lengthy history, and, well, when I say lengthy, you know, really, it's kind of humbling. You know, we live in such a sheltered age. We have so much technology that we take so for granted day after day, and forget that it wasn't that long ago people were in much different circumstances, and all the fancy farm machinery or the forestry harvester, you know, that I'm driving in this video here, just simply did not exist. As you would say, they don't make men like they used to. So we everything that we have, of course, is building on the shoulders of giants that came before us. So I always think it's good to look at the past, see what they did, and it helps appreciate much more of the present and what we have. But a steam up or threshing bee is fairly common, or was fairly common over the years. Various people would have them. And this here, there was just a group that got together. So I'm reading now, looking at their website, the history. The early threshing bee gatherings were set up by farmers and harvesters who had worked in the fields using steam and wished to occasionally live in the past with their engines. The Mickelsons put on their first show in 1954 and continued through 1966 until these shows were too much responsibility for one individual to assume. Rodney Pitts also sponsored shows at his place from 1955 to 1959. The Western Steam Fiends Association, WSFA, held shows in Woodburn from 1967 to 1969. A group of people who had been the backbone of past shows formed a corporation under Ed Currens and decided it was time to look for a permanent home for these shows. Western Antique Power Incorporated, WAPI, was formed and leased property found in Brooks, Oregon from Frank Petzel. The first steam up held in Brooks was in 1970, and WAPI signed a lease for this property in 1971. WAPI later bought the property, and in 2001, Antique Powerland Museum Association APMA, an Oregon nonprofit corporation, was formed to manage the property. In 2017, this property became known as Powerland Heritage Park, made up of several museums who continue to grow and work collaboratively to be the home of the Great Oregon Steam Up. Well, now that is what their website says, and I'm a couple days later from when I recorded everything else. You know, have you ever had that experience where you get the pleasure of redoing something maybe multiple times? I recorded a voiceover for this video, finished it all the way up, or so I thought, and realized that my treacherous recording software, for whatever reason, I could see the file building just like I can observe it here now. It's got this red bar going out, and it's recording what I say, but it just didn't keep it. So I'm gonna try to chop it up maybe in smaller parts here. I don't know. Anyway, just one of those things, you know, when you go through something, even with the game, you know, this is something I haven't ever particularly cared for. Even though I love Farming Simulator and really enjoy pretty much anything in there that I would do, I never like having to redo it. You know, so it's you know, if you combine a field or whatever and the game crashes, you know, and you didn't save it, and then you got to go back and combine the same field all over again. For some reason, as fun as I find this game, as much as I enjoy it, I don't like having to redo it. So anyway, I lost everything that I had, so now I get to do it all over again. And of course, one always thinks that it's never going to be quite as good as the first time when you did it. Of course, as everybody listening to this knows, I don't have the best voice anyhow, so I just work with whatever I have. So anyway, I'm going to pause this at the moment to make sure it saves it after talking here a couple minutes, and we'll come right back with the next one. Well, it seemed to save everything, so I'm going to give this a try again. And the last time, kind of what I went through after reading what the brochure material, if you will, that they had on their website is just kind of a recounting of how the days went for this Great Oregon Steam Up, if you will. 55th annual this year, by the way. That they had, and once again, I can't remember even anymore if I described all this, but it was on 2 weekends in July and August, the last weekend in July, and the first weekend, Saturday, Sunday in August. And so the schedule that they have kind of, you know, lays the day out so that if a person goes to this, you kind of know what's coming next, and if there are particular things that are of interest to you to see, that you can schedule your time accordingly. So the gates open at 7 o'clock a.m., so you can go in there, and at 8, you know, what's interesting here is I look at this is probably on the Sundays, at 8 o'clock a.m., they would literally have a church service in there. They call it the Hall of Music. You know, they have not only vintage equipment and things that are there, but also vintage buildings. And there's maybe more that could be said about that, but there's, you know, the Hall of Music. It's probably a vintage church building of some kind that they would have services in there, and I don't know what they do. Maybe they have a local pastor come in and have a service on those mornings. I don't know how you have a vintage church service or whatnot, but anyway, they have that in there. You know, another vintage building that I know they have is a depot for, I think it was Brooks, Oregon, years ago, was kind of a depot, train station, if you will. Somehow they got the building and they now have it over there. So I know there's vintage buildings to go in. They also have at 8 o'clock a.m. What they call the Great Northern Lego Railway Display, and I didn't see it at 8. I think it was pretty much open all day. That just happened to be when they opened the display, kind of a farm scenes. And you know, this is kind of I call it a steam up, or they call it a steam up. It's called Antique Powerland. It has all this vintage equipment, but it has a sizable number of other attractions, and it's quite diverse, but it's obviously catering to a group of people that they know would have interests, you know, in certain subjects. For example, in this case here, Legos and trains. Well, you know, anybody working with these old machines they're mechanics, they are fabricators, they're people that are interested in a lot of those things. So who knows, some of their other hobbies may be Legos and other things. And you know, I didn't mention this last time when I tried to record something here, but one of the buildings on the complex here for Antique Powerland is a model railroad club. And you know, they don't really say anything about it in here. I don't know that they're involved in the Steam update, but I do know there's a group that meets over there. They have a layout you can go see. I think it's open to the public at certain times. May have been open during this time, but I didn't go there this particular trip. But I did go to the Lego display, and that is the 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock hour. And after 8 o'clock is an 9 o'clock hour, of course. And here they started off with the national anthem, opening ceremony, if you will. They have a flagpole kind of at the front entrance. And incidentally, this when I visited there this last summer, that happened to be when I came in. And they had somebody, I think, playing the national anthem. I didn't hear anybody sing it. Maybe sometimes they do. It was on a trumpet or something. And I don't know. I'm a reasonably patriotic person. That always makes my heart skip a beat to hear the national anthem. Just a recognition of the country that I'm part of here and the opportunities it's given me and those that came before me for reasonable freedom. And so I appreciate that they have a nod to the flag. Although I would add too, again, the interests that come here are very diverse. So not only is there vintage farm equipment, there also is a sizable amount of vintage military equipment that they also have on display here. So there is you know, people that are available to sing or play the national anthem, and a lot of veterans, you know, that were present also at this event. Also at 9 o'clock, it says all 14 museums open, and they're open until 5 p.m. And maybe I don't know that I'll get to it in this video, maybe in another one, if I do another voiceover, if I trust this thing to try to record me, I can go through and explain, you know, the various museums that they have. It's just something that they've added to over the years. There's more and more of them to cater to different interests in vintage cars and equipment, and primarily farming related, but also, like I say, pretty varied. They have a couple things here that I don't recognize. Youth Passport open. I'm not sure what that is. Quilt and Craft Bazaar open until 5 p.m. You know, a lot of this admittedly caters to men or to male interest. Primarily, I realize there's sometimes ladies that are interested in all that too, and don't get me wrong, there was lots of women there too. But traditionally, I know things like quilts and crafts and clothing, you know, there was some people dressed up in vintage costume, if you will, vintage clothing. Some people I know really get into that, and not only are they dressing the part, they're also acting the part. And when you talk to them, you know, well, I can't talk any longer. I need to go out and churn the butter, or however they would say it, you know, back in the day. So there was some of those people there too. But maybe a nod to the ladies, quilt and craft, and not just the ladies. I remember as a kid, I have a number of memories working on quilts. So it's what I would say is a dying art because there just aren't that many people anymore who will work with their hands on a lot of this, including, some of the things that the ladies worked on back in the day for their families, whether it's clothing, quilt, blankets, and these kinds of things that people used to just make by hand instead of buying like we do so often. So they had some displays for all of that. They also had an area where they showed replica steam engine models, many of them working, and it just blows my mind, that some people will put together a teeny tiny little steam engine, and not only will they make a replica of a real life one, like of an old farm machine, but they will literally get it working, and here you have a tiny little steam engine puffing away with however it's powered with the steam, and it's you almost have a little bomb on your hands, if the boiler would blow, but anything in miniature form. So they had quite a display of some of those. And then they have notice here at the 9 o'clock hour, they call it a blacksmith demonstration that's open until 4 o'clock p.m. They had a building dedicated, and I remember seeing this as a kid. It was still in the same place it's always been. That is also another dying trade, if you will. We're just so used to, whenever we need parts for something, well, we go to the hardware store, we call the equipment dealership, and they send us the exact part that we need. But there was a day when none of that existed, and if you wanted parts or had something that needed to be fixed, you would go to a blacksmith, and they would do it all by hand over, a coal-fired fire, or however they do that. Maybe it's some kind of charcoal briquettes or whatever they use in there to generate the heat, and all done by hand and done by the skill of someone who had skills to do that. Typically a man with an anvil and a hammer and pliers, and I say it's a dying art. I know there's guys that still do it. The accounting firm I work at, there's a gentleman that's one of our employees who is also a blacksmith, kind of as a hobby. I think it kind of drives his neighbors nuts because he'll do it out of his garage, and when he's in the mood, to do some blacksmithing and he's firing up his forge, it kind of puts things out in the air. People can smell it, they can hear the ping of the hammer and all that, so it's noisy, but it's really cool here. I remember watching the guy for a while with whatever they're choosing to make, and they're not only experts at their craft, where they've carried it forward so other generations like ours can see it, but they're also very articulate in how it's done, why it was done, the way it's done, and it's just really cool that there are people so interested in a trade like that, that they keep it going, so we today can see how it was done. Well, then along comes the 9:15 hour, or 15 minutes after 9, and it says they have an all-ages garden tractor pulling event. And here, I know they try to bring in the young people and the kids, and when they say garden tractor, they are talking vintage lawnmowers, basically. And I know I grew up, we had probably about an acre of yard, and fortunately, Dad was able to provide a riding lawnmower, so we've spent a lot of time mowing the yard over the years, although back then I never would have imagined using the thing, to pull something in a tractor pull event. But just like the modern farm machinery and anything else, where technology has advanced and changed over time, so it has also occurred with even the humble lawnmower. And here I think obviously it'd be riding lawnmowers for these kids, and I know some of these things, it isn't just stock as to how they were created by the factory, if you will, but there's some people that really get into it and they soup them things up, make them go fast. I mean, even racing with them. They're kind of limited on traction or whatever, but anyway, I think for the kids back over the grandstand that they have at this place, they had a garden tractor pulling event. So they had that going on. I didn't go see that. That wasn't really in my area of interest, or there were other things I was seeing at the moment. And at the 10 o'clock hour, they had several other things start. The top of one here says the 1/8 scale train rides open. And those of you that listen to my channel know a few episodes back I described a trip that our family took this last, I think it was September, where we went to visit one of the largest such places in the world called Terrain Mountain, where it also is a 1/8 scale train, kind of just on a massive property, where we were able to go ride these small trains, and it's probably about 7.5 inches wide on the track, so fairly small. I may have even mentioned at the time Willow Creek Railroad, which is the one that sits here at Antique Powerland. And there really isn't anything antique about it, other than, there may be people who have interest in the old steam engines, so maybe they create a 1/8 scale replica of a steam engine, and they have it pulling people on this track. So anyway, it's probably about an acre in size, so not nearly the scale, that they had at Train Mountain. But that's there too, and in the past I've ridden on that any number of times. But I gotta say, after being at the one at Train Mountain, it's definitely kind of wrecks it, if you go to the smaller one. But they have that over there too. That opened at 10. Big band music. This was going on the day that I was there. It says it was only available on one of the Saturdays. I didn't hear it because I was out and about. So I know they were playing. It's always cool when there's a bunch of big band players, local enthusiasts, just to make some music and some racket at a place like this. It adds to the ambiance. So I'm a little disappointed I didn't hear it, but it's cool that they had that too. Also, trolley rides. It says open until 4 p.m. This one I think they charged a fee for. It's interesting. I'm looking here. It's on the different screens. I have on my computer. On the other one, I have a map, kind of the whole location. And there's a trolley track, if you will, that goes kind of around the whole thing, at least the west, north, and east sides, and then the line kind of comes into the heart of the property, if you will. And you may recall I mentioned a building, the Brooks Depot, earlier. It comes down alongside that, and I don't know that I've ever seen the trains venture in that far, but maybe they have a time or two. So if you were interested in the train technology and wanted to take a ride on the trolley, you could. And they had several other things there too related to the railroad, whether an old engine, old cars, many of them that looked just hideous. I mean, they were badly in need of some TLC, if you will, tender loving care, and needed restoration. Probably one of the coolest things that they had sitting there on tracks was a crane, a steam crane, and they had it fired up and working when we were there. It was kind of over by their logging museum, so it's kind of cool to see that. But trolley rides could be had if you wanted. Also a 10 a.m. threshing demonstration, and this now kind of gets to the heart of what is intended for a quote steam up, or often what it means, to have what they call a good old fashioned threshing bee. And herein is some of the work, that it takes to even put on an event like this. It's one thing to drag some old machines out and display them, line them up or whatever. But it's another thing entirely if you want to literally use those machines, like in this case here, threshing. You have a lot of planning that basically takes the whole year to do. Adjacent to this property was a field that I think they leased from a local farmer, and they had planted wheat, And so someone had to plant it the previous fall, someone had to nurture it along through the year, and obviously God grew it until it was ready, to be harvested in the weekends that we were there. But this demonstration was the old stationary threshing machine, where someone would go out and cut the grain and it would put it into bundles. Typically back in the day, someone would stack the bundles into shocks. You would come along with a bundle wagon to pick up the bundles when you're ready for harvest, and you would haul them to this stationary threshing machine parked somewhere along the field or in the barnyard, and it would be a lot of times powered by steam. And the day that I went out there, they had a steam engine puffing away, running this thing with a big belt on the flywheel of this steam engine was powering the threshing machine. And there's a whole lot more that could be said, and I'll maybe just hold off on that. We could say some other time. But it's quite a thing to see. And back in the day, harvest was a really social event. And it still is. Anybody related to agriculture who has worked on a farm, you just know whether it's harvest or anything that you do, it's teamwork. It's just unfortunately there are fewer team members anymore versus what they had back in the day. So that was a threshing demonstration that they had in a field kind of next to the main property. And of course, if they are harvesting wheat, the next thing that also was happening at the same time was a flour milling demonstration. They have a building dedicated to milling the flour, machine in there that had the whetstones, whatever those stones are called, that grind out the flour. And unfortunately, I think years ago they literally powered the grinder with steam power or an old machine. Anymore, I think they just do it electric, but all the old pulleys are there so they could hook it up if they wished, but most of the time they don't wish to. Maybe it's because they need the steam power on other things or that kind of thing. But they also have that going on as well, where they take the wheat that is harvested in the field and they literally turn it into flour in this building. And I think they even sell it to the public, if they want to purchase flour that was ground there. Oftentimes wheat or anything harvested in the field, whether it comes out of the combine or out of the threshing machine, it may have some impurities in it, weeds or that kind of thing. So I don't know how they clean it. They may have a cleaner somewhere too. So they had that going on in the country store, and I saw it later in the day. It was kind of cool. And then also at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock is a big hour. It's a heart of the morning. That's when a lot of things, get going, I guess. But they had a yarder and logging demonstration. They do have a whole museum dedicated to Pacific Northwest logging, and they have a logging setup there. The way of the logging is done is, well, there's similarities with current day and the past, but most of the logging that takes place in our area, it's generally in steep terrain in the mountainous areas, if you will, and they put up a high-rise pole and they attach to it, I think they may still call it the spar tree or whatever, and they hook these heavy lines to it, and they have a mule, I think they call it, basically motive power on the wires up there. I call them wires, they're heavy cables. And from this mule, which goes up and down the heavy cables, there's another cable that lowers to the guys down on the slope, who are picking up the logs. I say picking them up. They're setting choker cables and hooking them up to this mule, which then hauls the logs up to the landing at the top of the hill. So they have a place at Antique Powerland where these techniques are demonstrated, and they do them live, where people can see kind of how it was done back in the day. And that's why I say there are a lot of similarities to how things are done now versus how they were in the past. It's hopefully a little safer now versus how it was in the past, but I'm not even so sure about that. I mean, it's kind of a rough business putting a tree on the ground, removing its branches, cutting it to length, and hauling those logs out, so we can make something of them in the mill or for timber and whatnot. But it's pretty cool that they have something set up, where guys can demonstrate how this was done. And that is all in the 10 o'clock hour. Well, and after 10 o'clock, of course, comes 11 o'clock, and I am rapidly running out of time here. I don't know how I managed to make it clear till noon the first time that I recorded this, but I'm definitely going to have to do another video on this, I think. But at the 11 o'clock hour, following kind of up on the logging, they have an early day logging skills demonstration. And some of this is just good old-fashioned fun and competition. It maybe has a root in the past, but anymore it's become competition. For example, this is where you would see a log rolling contest. Well, I don't know how much logging is really done on the job, or how much log rolling is done on the job anymore. That's horrifically dangerous if you're doing it in the mill pond of a sawmill, of course. But that is one of the competitive things, where you can watch a couple people square up and they do it in the water, and of course you don't want to be the one that falls in the drink. So, but back in the day, your ability to stay on top of a log, whether you rolled it or not, was critical. And maybe some use it now if you're taking large bits of timber kind of over open water or what have you, but generally it's a lost art. Anyway, I'm out of time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.